Welcome to College Planning Night for Juniors. We're delighted that you're joining us for this exciting evening that kicks off the college admissions process for our junior class. It's hard to believe that we're finally here, and we hope that you'll enjoy this presentation. Tonight, we're going to hear from college admissions professionals, and you're also going to hear from your school counselors who will share important information that you need to take next steps. My name is Valerie Feit. I am co-director of school counseling, and on behalf of Corinne Ryan, who is also co-director, and our counselors, Amanda Menke, Susan Hannon, and Evan Miller, we want to welcome our distinguished panel of college admissions professionals, and we're going to just go through some introductions. Emma Fortunato, do you want to give a wave and give us your title?
Hi, I'm the Assistant Director of Freshman Admissions at Dominican College.
Thank you. And Lori Austin on the phone.
Hi, I'm so sorry I can't be there on the in person, but having a little technical issue here. But I'm Director of Admissions at Lehman College, and I'm very happy to be here on the phone.
Thank you. And Craig Broccoli.
Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Broccoli with Binghamton University. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions, but I'm based in the New York City area.
Okay, thank you. And Emily Morris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Morris. I'm a Senior Assistant Director for Regional Enrollment for Miami University in Ohio. Although my school is in Ohio, I'm regionally based on the East Coast.
Thank you. And Kevin McKenna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin McKenna, Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at Sarah Lawrence College, just down the road in Bronxville, New York.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Patrick O'Neill.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Patrick O'Neill, Associate Director of Admissions here at the University of Rochester.
Okay, well, thank you all. And I think that we're ready to get started. The questions were submitted by our juniors over a period of years, so I think we've got a lot of things covered. What's really great, I'm sorry, Dr. Wilson has joined us as well. He's the principal, as you well know. So welcome, Dr. Wilson. The questions cover a lot of different topics, but we also have sent you a link so that if you have other questions and you'd like to email them in, we'll take a look at them and see if we can answer them. We are posing general questions to our panel, and if you have anything that's really specific to your student or family, you can always contact your school counselor later. So our first question, what changes have you seen in your applicant pools as a result of the pandemic, and are students in Westchester at a demographic disadvantage? Anybody want to take that?
I'll start on the phone, Lori. Okay, so in the fall, we actually had a much larger applicant pool for freshmen than we've had in many years, and same with our enrollment numbers. We were very pleased. And students are not at any kind of disadvantage in Westchester at all. We do have many, many students from Westchester. We are, however, now finding for our incoming fall class that applications are much slower than they have been in the past coming in. And we've been speaking with a lot of the high school counselors who have told us that because students are virtual and they are not in touch with students as much and can't nudge them as much because they're not seeing them in person in the schools, many of them, that things are definitely lagging behind a bit right now. So we're hoping that will change.
Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you so much. Our second question, how important is demonstrated interest, and do you note visits and interviews and inquiries? And then the follow-up question, which is you're offering virtual tours at this point. Do you track those and those people who attend? So anybody would like to answer that?
Yeah, I'll start on a kind of a high-level view. I always like to tell students interest is important. Now, the demonstrated part, the fact that you feel like you might need to do this in order to look good, that is usually not as important when you talk about the whole scheme of college admissions. But what I want to get at is that if you're interested in a school, feel very free to show that interest in many different ways. And I'll kind of dot line to that virtual world that we live in. it's somewhat hard to ignore the fact that you can sign up for these virtual events and you also can register and show up to them. We can see that quite easily. I mean, technology allows that part. Now, every school might use that differently if they're actually paying attention to it or if they just check in periodically. But I will shine a little light on this past year or so. I've noticed, and I've been working in admissions for about 10 years, it's a lot easier to in the virtual world to start to see the same name and face pop up over time, and you could truly see a student's progression, which is why I always tell students, if you got the time and you're interested in a school, show up. It creates a conversational line in ways that maybe never used to be able to happen. We used to show up to your school maybe once a year. We might see you there, or you might visit our campus. This gives you an opportunity to see a school and get to know the admission staff maybe in a different way than ever before. So embrace that part.
Okay. How do you sort and process applications? I think Lori's coming in. Here we go. All right. How do you sort and process applications?
I guess I can start.
Hang on one second. I'm just going to say hello, Lori. Thank you so much for
I made it.
We so appreciate it.
I was determined. Thank you. Sorry for the delay.
No worries. I'm going to go to Mr. McKenna, and you were about to answer the question, how do you process applications?
Sure, I can start, and then I'm sure other schools have different angles on it because it really is a school by school process. So I'll give two little answers. One is just the sheer processing of it. For most schools, what happens is we will get the bulk of the application material from the Common Application, and it comes in from them, or in some cases a state application if you're applying to some states' university systems, but Common Application or an application like that, you fill that out and we get it sort of on the back end, and it comes to us electronically. And that's how we get that. And it comes in different pieces. So different pieces come in different times. And so when you have an application account, a lot of times you'll be able to see which pieces have been received and which pieces haven't. So you'll submit the main part of the application, the Common App. And then there might be other pieces that maybe the letters of recommendation or transcripts or mid-year reports that may come in at different times. So be aware that most schools will also give you a kind of checklist or a way for you to check through a portal what pieces have come in and what haven't. So that's one thing to be aware of. It kind of comes to us from a lot of different sources, and we do the best we can to kind of compile them all into your file. So if you ever have a question about whether your file is complete or not, it's a really simple question to ask. Send us an email or give us a call, and we'll be able to do that. Now, the second piece of that, how do we sort of process them once we get them? Once we have a virtual file with your name on it, how do we process it then? That's really where schools start to diverge a lot. And so depending on their reading processes, they might have sort of a first reader and the second reader. They might do committees reading files at the same times. So that's really going to vary from college to college. But a little tip that I like to give, if a college does have an area or a regional counselor, I know there's a couple here even, a lot of times that information would be on their website, so you'll know who to get in touch with if there's somebody working in your area specifically with your students from Westchester, let's say. So a couple angles on processing of the files, but I guess I would say there's the technological piece. We do the best we can to try to make sure we get all the pieces in one spot for you. And then there's the kind of human piece, or the, how we deal with it in our offices. Really different, but always feel free to reach out and ask us too.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll jump in just to tag along. I'm a great example of one of those regional reps. So while I don't live in Oxford, Ohio, where Miami's campus is, and I live on the East Coast, travel to specific states, I read mostly those states and those applications. So a lot of our regional reps get very familiar with different high schools and their profiles. So while Miami, it goes through more than one reader, if I'm from your area, it's likely it will go through me first. So that's how that regional piece works for us.
And in normal years, we have over 95 reps come to Rhineac, and the students can actually meet all of you in person and really form, strong relationships. So hopefully by next fall, we'll be doing that again. We have another question here, which is, what kinds of program and career trends are you seeing? Lori? Lori, you're on mute. We've got it unmute here.
I got it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Tonight is not my night.
It's all right.
Being on Zoom for like 8 hours today, I don't know. But anyway, I'm sorry. So at Lehman, we have a lot of health related majors. Nursing happens to be a big one. And that has always been popular and it continues to be. And especially now, people who are really dedicated to the field of health with the pandemic and everything are certainly even more interested in pursuing the health fields. We also have a lot of students that continue to be very interested in business and psychology, and those things remain popular, always have been, will continue to. But I was really interested to see what happened with the health field because I didn't know if it would scare people away after going through what they've been going through this year or encourage them to get even more involved. And they certainly have been.
Go
And
ahead.
I'll note that while not necessarily always a major choice, meaning a choice of major the student decides to pursue, there's been, I've noticed over the last 2 years, an uptick in interest in sustainability or environmental science, and that being kind of merged together with other fields, which I find to be pretty savvy of students thinking in that direction. But also, as Laurie noted, the data business side, but specifically data analytics, which ends up becoming a merger between computer science and your traditional business fields. That's been a hot field lately that seems to have some real room to grow still.
Okay, well, thank you. Our next question, when thinking about your institution, how do you determine the profile of a successful candidate and what does he or she look like? I think students tend to hear, that colleges and universities have a sort of mythical perfect student that they measure other students by. Is that true?
I'll start. I think because we all want to answer about, who is our students that we typically get, and that's the benefit of having 4,000 college. We all probably have a slightly different student body and student profile, although comprised of a lot of different students. And that's probably the key here. There is not one magic student that fits a college, and therefore you have to be that student in order to find a fit in. Ultimately, I mean, when we talk about the world of admissions, we're really trying to find students who are going to thrive, well, first and foremost, academically on our campuses. So it's easy to lean on the academic profile of our student body. Our average students, sometimes we like to say, or middle 50% of our student ranges, and the academic numbers tell a lot about who that student is. But you can start to peel into that and say, well, what type of high 90s student is, or mid 90s, or a B student? Are they a competitive bunch? Are they more of a collaborative bunch? Do they tend to come in with a diverse array of thoughts and minds, and therefore they're at a school where they can explore, or are they all on certain tracks? So I think this is where you'll notice that, and maybe this is going back to that first answer I was giving in the beginning, when you're showing up to a lot of different events or engaging with admissions officers at different times of the year, as you get more and more interested in what you want in a school, you're going to start to hear the answers back to you about what school resonates with you. And we're going to be very clear with our students sort of who that typical good fit student is. Sometimes it's going to come in the academic numbers, but other times, once we've got that academic part out there, we're going to talk about the other aspects of our student body, sort of the things that they're interested in, the types of activities like they do, whether it's the middle of a week, Wednesday night, what are our students doing? What's the thing that gets them excited? Or on the weekends, are they the type that go off campus and explore? Are they more the type that are staying in and working on their student projects? These are the info pieces that you're going to gather that will help you figure out, is this the right fit? Back to that beginning stage there, though, we on the admissions end are going to be as clear as we can about who the right academic fit will be for our incoming class, because ultimately, if we're going to say yes to you, we want to know that with as best good faith as we can, that you're still going to be there sophomore year and junior year, that you stuck on academically. So we tend to lean on that a lot.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share with us? on that one?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in, and
Okay.
I might be jumping ahead. I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but Miami and many schools use something called a holistic approach when we review an applicant. So it's every piece of the puzzle that's going to help us make that decision, and not just one particular point or one particular piece that, oh, they check this box, they're in. It's really not how it works. Of course, academically, we want you to be successful when you get here, but we want to make sure you're a good human. We're a residential college. Are you going to be someone that we want living in our residence halls? So it's a pretty broad answer to a question that was meant to be specific, but I think Craig hit the nail on the head there. It's a lot of pieces that come into that decision. And because every college has its own personalities, it's got to be a fit both ways, right? We want you to feel fit here, and we want us to be a fit there. So just adding that in.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to flip the question a little bit. What should the students be looking at in terms of your profiles as schools? And what are the top factors that you think they should use to assess whether or not a school is a fit for them? Patrick, would you like to just, we haven't heard from you, so it'd be nice to hear because you're at a big university up in Rochester.
Absolutely. So maybe I'll jump to two that jump to my mind rather than hogging all five, in case there are others here who have a couple of things they'd like to share. I think going beyond just an understanding of what majors and programs an institution offers, and to get a more nuanced sense of what the actual curriculum is there. In addition to, what might be required for, let's say, a biology major or a business major. What are the other expectations for graduation at that institution? How might that correlate with what kind of college level experiences you've had in high school already? If I was going to answer one of those earlier questions about career and major trends I'm seeing, I continue to see more and more what I call multi-decided students, and students who come as first years and know they want to do business and something else. And so I think being able to have, if that resonates with you, right, if you're thinking of something like that, being able to not just see, does an institution have these different programs that I could pursue, but how feasible is it? How much might I be able to explore something like studio art while also being a mechanical engineer? And then the other thing, and this is related to what Emily was just talking about, as a residential campus, right? Also getting an understanding of what that residential student life experience is like. I think while we all, I imagine, miss seeing students and families on our campus, and especially the opportunities that are very valuable for prospective students and families to meet our own students. One of the aspects that has been positive out of all of this growth in virtual events is that it's made oftentimes one-on-one connections between prospective students and current students a lot more feasible, and not requiring maybe as much time and effort to travel. So those would be the two things that kind of jump to my mind, but I'll leave some time for others if to fill out the rest of the five.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else like to jump in?
How about I add two more, and then we can continue breaking it up. I actually I 100% agree with Patrick, and I actually, it's interesting because my first answer is a slightly different spin, or maybe a prequel to your first answer, which is make sure that the schools you're looking at have the programs that you actually want to do, right? So Patrick's point was look beyond the majors and minors, but you also want to spend some time making sure you understand what you want to do. And I'll give a really quick example. Sarah Lawrence has architecture and design studies. That's very different than a bachelor's degree in architecture, right? And so you don't want to get to a school and say, oh, I thought I was getting one kind of degree and it's a different one, because that's going to leave you just a little discouraged once you actually get there. And you want to try to be really aware of making sure the school has it. The second one, this is going to sound a little obvious, and it might not be where we wanted to go quite yet, but I think it's not unfair to say in the initial top five to be looking at the net price calculator as you're building your lists. And that every school has a net price calculator that will give you some idea of the affordability of the school and what kind of financial aid packages they have. And especially these days, I think it's important to sort of have that even at those early stages of your college search.
Understood. Good point. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so to maybe take it from a different standpoint than what Kevin just mentioned, we find that many of our students coming in are not quite sure what they want to study. Or if they think they know what they want to study, they often change their minds, maybe more than once or twice. So I think it's really important that a school offers a variety of majors, that there's some flexibility built into the program so that if they do change their mind, which they often do, that they can switch to other major areas. And I also want to mention our students are very practical and they want to make sure that they have a good job when they get out of school. So looking for things like internships, which we offer, many opportunities for hands-on experience, opportunities to work with faculty in labs, getting real practical experience so you're building your resume while you're in college.
Go ahead.
And
Yeah.
one thing that I would say, and that you maybe shouldn't be focusing on too much, but there's a part that you should focus on within this, is the acceptance rate. Or at least determining, hey, this is a good school for me because of the acceptance rate. And what I mean by that, it tends to narrow students' focus, saying, this school must be good because it's so hard to get into. What it really is probably telling you is that an admissions office is really good, right? They know what they're doing. They know who the right fit student is. And that could be a good thing. But where I'm going with this is look beyond that number and start looking at, of those students who they tend to accept, is that student like me? And maybe the easiest way, kind of what we were talking about earlier, is looking at that type of academic that they are. Are they more so the curious type, or the driven type on a certain track, or the collaborative type, or the competitive type? And this is going to be harder than just looking at a spreadsheet or looking at some percentages, but it's going to take time, and it's ultimately will help you find the right fit school for you to thrive at academically.
Good point. Go ahead.
And I want to add one more thing. Make sure they have the fun stuff that you're interested in. Yes, we are focused. Emma, did I just take that from you?
Yeah, no, go for
Yes,
it.
obviously academics are important, but if you want a good esports program, do they have it? Do you want to play club ice hockey? College is, yes, about the academics and where you're going, but you got to have fun while you're doing it. So check out the fun stuff too.
Right. That's going to be the whole experience inside the classroom and out.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you. That's really, really great to know. All right, so here's another one. When you are considering a candidate, who is on your admissions panel or committee? Go ahead.
So we only utilize staff to review applications, admission staff. Every complete application to Rochester is read independently by two of us. Typically, that first evaluation is done by your admissions counselor. So that counselor who comes and visits your school understands the curriculum, everything that makes your school your school. So they come with that with maybe a greater degree of nuance and expertise about understanding various elements of rigor and other things that are important for us to wrap our heads around. Then the application is read by somebody after that who sees a lot of what that first evaluator entered without actually seeing what their recommendation for admission was. And then if those two recommendations for admissions from those first two readers do not match, which is the vast majority of the time for us at Rochester, it then goes to a committee of an odd number of admissions counselors for another round of review. And there are some tangents related to combined programs for med school and other things that might be an additional step in that process. But for early and regular decision applicants, it's at least two readers for everybody.
Wow, that's quite intensive. Because the follow-up question to that, of course, is how much time do you spend reviewing applications when you have so many?
Quite a bit. It's good job security. But that first review for us, because now we can track everything, typically is around 18 to 22 minutes. That 20 tends to be about the sweet spot for us. And then that second review does tend to be shorter, but the period has a greater degree of variance. So some might be more closer to 5 or 6 minutes, and some might be longer than that. Again, just depending on the individual application.
And I'll just chime in that that will vary institution by institution. Obviously, when you see higher application numbers at schools, particularly, you'll see this at a lot of the big state systems even, it will be maybe 5 minutes or less in some cases. And we often say if it's a quicker read, it's probably a good thing in terms of what we're looking at in the fit there. But in any scenario, it could go on to further readers, which will ultimately take more time in this process. So I always tell students, you put a lot of energy into your application. Understand that we're going to do our best to efficiently get through that part of what you're putting into that and try to find the right fit decision for you.
Got it. Yeah, they do put a lot into it. Tremendous amount of work goes into those applications. If you had to give 2 don'ts and 2 do's for an application, what would those be?
I'll start with one don't. Don't let your parent do it for you. Yes, parents, you know, you need to be involved, you need to be supportive, but you need to let your student work through this process by themselves. So I'll throw that out there. I'll let my colleagues here pick up some other do's and don'ts.
I'll add a do that kind of does the other side of it. I totally 100% agree. Don't let someone else write it for you, but do get a voice that you trust to review it for appropriateness. Don't let them take your voice away from you, but do have an outside set of eyes, because as you just heard, I think most admissions offices are going to have multiple people looking at the files, and you never know. And one of the reasons we have multiple people looking at the files is we know that first reader might have a bad day one day, and then we can ensure that, you know, there's another read on the other side. So there's already going to be multiple people looking at what you send us. Get someone you trust to kind of say, yeah, you know what, this is going to pass the eye test for, you know, sending it into essentially a room full of strangers, you know, who may be discussing it around a table.
That's a good point. Go ahead.
I'll add a don't compare yourself to anyone else in your class. You both might be applying to the same school, but you have different majors and different interests, and that school might need more women in engineering or certain people, and that's okay. You know, do not compare yourself. This is your experience. This is your journey. It's fun to kind of share where you are going, but do not say, well, I know, you know, my buddy got this much money, but I have a better GPA. Don't compare yourself. Just do your best. Ask us questions, but this is going to be a different journey for every single person. There is no way to compare it at all.
Good point. Go ahead, Emma.
I was going to say, going off Emily, don't be afraid to keep track of your application. Don't be afraid to follow up with us. Going back to earlier in the evening, it shows a really quick demonstrated interest that we know you're interested. We know you want to stay on top of your application, and it keeps you in the loop. We want to keep you in the loop as much as possible. So don't be afraid to come talk to us.
Thank you. I just want to go back a little bit in terms of the parent role. Parents are about to you know, put a sizable investment into a college education, and clearly, you know, it's difficult to leave everything up to a young person when the stakes are so high. So, what role should parents play in this process?
I've really been thinking about this question once we saw the list, and I always like to do the analogy of you're like the bumpers in the bowling alley, right? Like you can help guide them along the process, but you're not going to college, mom, dad, or adult in your family. It's the student. This year has been an obnoxious amount of phone calls of, I applied, I know we turned this in. I'm like, oh, are you coming to college? Not your student? So that's really hard to hear. Okay, so definitely be on top of your student. Make sure they've turned things in. Contact us. We're happy to help, but please let your student take charge. We want to hear a student's voice in the application. We don't expect an incredible, I know we're going to get to essays, but we can tell if it's a high school voice or a parent voice. So be the bumpers, help guide them along, but they need to do this. They need to take charge.
Go ahead.
I think it's also really important to be very honest with your student in terms of affordability. What can you manage? What's within reach for you, and have those discussions early on so that students are not applying for schools that are totally unaffordable, you know, so that they're not disappointed if they get into a school and you just can't afford it. There are so many options and affordable schools out there. So just, have those conversations. Don't shy away from that.
Thank you. I just want to say to our parent audience here that in September every year we have a financial aid person come and just spend an entire evening answering those finance questions. But it's good to get an early start, and you can also reach out to your counselor. Thank you for addressing that. We're going to move in a slightly different direction. We're going back into the applications. This is obviously something on the kids' minds, but how important are the essays, the central essay and the supplements, and what criteria are applied to rating their quality?
Yeah, I'll start on the general part of the essay. The essay could have a varying level of importance for every different college that may be reviewing that. And just keep that in mind. Not every college is going to look at your essay with the same sort of light and the same sort of weight. We're all individuals as well. So even the individual reader may look at your essay differently than another person would. Nonetheless, it's a very important part, no matter how you look at this, because this is one of the aspects of your application as a student that you have the utmost control over. But keep in mind, what we're looking for is just how you communicate and what's on your mind and what are you thinking about. It could be about something you overcame in life. It could be about something that you're excited to jump into in the future. It could be about a lot of different things, but the key is that you want to tell us about it. If it's not something you're eager to tell us about, it's probably not going to be a great essay. But ultimately, throughout this, what we're really assessing is not necessarily how well of a writer are you, what did you write down and how did you write it. Yes, that will come out, and a great writer will certainly showcase his or her skills. We know that, and that's a good opportunity. But it's not necessarily just about that writing ability per se as the communication ability. If you are more of a terse communicator, it's okay to be that type of person in your college essay if that's how you communicate. Now, we're going to dial into that a little bit, but ultimately, that essay is not the piece in your application that's supposed to make or break a yes or a no. That won't be the case. It certainly could give us some questions to think a little further about maybe something else in your application if that was the point of your essay. But when I talk to students about their essay, I really want to dial down the stress around it because you are going to put a lot of time into that. We know. But the amount of time that you're putting into that is oftentimes more than you really need to if you think about it. Because again, if it's something that you're really interested in writing and communicating to us, it should be one of those things that eventually when you see that topic and you start to craft it out, that you're eager to just even get it done because you're so excited to tell us about it. So that should help you maybe at least point you in the right direction in the future when you're sitting down to write it.
Mm-hmm. It does. Yeah. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on the essay piece? What about supplements? How important are supplements?
I mean, I'll take a stab at supplements. I mean, my best piece of advice on supplements is if a college makes it recommended at the end of the application, that's a good thing for you to think seriously about submitting, right? Obviously, if it says we require a supplemental essay, you really should spend time on that because a school that requires a supplemental essay is going to put a lot of weight usually in determining fit with the institution with that question. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of times. If it's recommended or if it's optional, and you have something different to say than you've already said in the Common App essay, it's a good opportunity for you to showcase a little bit more about either your interests and professional interests and post-college interests or in-college interests, or those things that are going to that sort of drew you to the school in the first place. I highly recommend, if it says recommended, I highly recommend you do it. And then just to give a little bit on how we sort of rate the quality of them, we know that, and this goes back maybe to bits of advice, and having some other set of eyes look at your application. We're not going to deny a file because we notice some grammar errors, but our eyebrows might raise, and we might get a little bit concerned that you might let grammar and spelling errors slip in college papers too. So don't over stress about it, but make sure you do a thorough job in reviewing for functional just pure functional appropriateness and correctness for your essay. That's one of the things I would say, that we're not looking to ding you with a red pen, but we do want to get a little bit of a sense of that. And then as far as how else we're looking at the quality of it, we'll let an error or two slide. What are you saying about yourself, and how well are you communicating ideas that you have? And then in other words, you don't have to be answering the most profound, world-solving prompt in the world. One of the best essays I read a couple months ago was an applicant from Manhattan who simply wrote about when a bubble tea shop opened up on a corner that they and their friends passed on their way to school every day. But the essay wasn't about the bubble tea shop, it was about the dynamics of the friends, right? And what they did in that space and how they communicated. So by that, we got a sense of how that applicant communicates in just sort of a small everyday kind of way. That's an essay that responded to the prompt. You should respond to the prompt, and then went a little bit beyond, right? So those are the ones that I think, I gave that as a little case study to say that's how I would read it, and I think that's how a lot of essay writers would read it. There's varying degrees as to how grammatical and structural correctness balance out with the engagement that you've clearly put into the writing. So I hope that helps with the evaluative answer too.
Yes, very much. Thank you. Our next question is a little bit loaded because clearly this is a very different year. But through the spring and then the summer and then the fall, and it looks like this winter and maybe even into this spring as well, there were a lot of cancellations of standardized tests, the ACT and the SAT, causing enormous stress for the kids. Many schools went optional. So our question is, in this climate, how important are those tests, and how much value do they have on an application if a school does accept them?
Can I start with that?
Sure.
Okay, so we've made a major change because of the pandemic. We always required SAT scores and ACT scores, and it played a fairly large role in our admissions decision. The City University decided that we are actually test blind now. Even if a student has them, we cannot look at them. So we have totally changed our criteria for how we look at students and are placing a lot more weight on individual subject grades, in addition to, of course, the overall, the number of academic units, et cetera. So yes, this has been a really, really big change for all of us within the City University. And I don't think we'll remain test blind, but I'm quite sure we will end up being test optional. That's my guess, because of what we've learned through all of this.
And just when we're specifically talking about this climate right now, know that every institution's number one priority is your health and safety. So do not stress yourself out if this continues to be an issue and there are no testing options. When a school is test optional, truly know that means optional. A big question I got was, is it a disadvantage? Absolutely not. If it says optional, it truly means that. So don't put extra stress on yourself if that's just not going to happen and you're not able to take a test for your application.
Okay, thank you. I think that's something that's very much on our juniors' minds because they're coming right around the corner toward that. So I'm going to just turn to my next page here. What about subject tests? For example, the SAT-2 tests, are those still relevant if a student is going into say a major like engineering or some other kind of technological or STEM field in particular?
I mean, I can speak for Rochester in that SAT-2s certainly don't play a significant role in our process. This is actually our second year being fully test optional. So we got a year of practice under our belts and feel more confident in going into this world. But just knowing many other schools, especially those with engineering programs, just wanting to share that SAT2s oftentimes are something that might be a required or recommended element for some of those particular programs. But I think everything having to do with testing is kind of on a shifting field of play right now. So just being aware as you are moving forward in your school year of what the expectations of some of these schools might be and how those might change. But I think at the end of the day, we're likely to come out the other side of this probably with a different set of expectations at some schools around what the minimum testing requirements for completion are. But I know many of my colleagues at other institutions would want to note that even if you might be a great test optional candidate, there might be scholarship opportunities or other programs where testing like subject tests or other broader standardized tests might be required or even recommended for some of those programs. So it's just, it's that old college admission adage, it depends. Each institution is a little bit different. So while standardized tests are certainly not going away anytime soon, I think the role they might play in admissions processes could be to some degree permanently changed by this really difficult experience we're all going through.
Which brings me to the next piece of the testing, which I think is really close to the kids' hearts. Regents examinations for the New York State students and also AP exams were really challenging. And I don't know that we're going to have a year where we're going to put kids in a room and they're going to take an AP test. So what about those tests that have more bearing on the GPA?
So I'll start, and I think oftentimes, and this is another one that every school is going to have a different philosophy on those other tests and other forms of standardized tests. I'll say for Binghamton University, and actually a lot of my colleagues on the SUNY side, we're not using AP tests as any level of a predictor for a student in terms of admissions. That we do look at AP exam scores later on in terms of credit evaluation if you're coming in with credit. Regents being part of a student's file in many cases, if it's there, if it's part of your transcript, it's going to be looked at. But under the context, we all are aware of the world that we're living in. We understand in some cases when the Regents part is exempt for this year, or if you didn't get a chance to retake that Regents that you had on the docket last year, and that the first score wasn't the best one in some previous years, that was a scenario where you could have changed that a little bit. So the context is in play. But with that being said, my recommendation is if you know it's something that's going to be in the views of a college admissions office at some day, and often anything that you put in your application and or is going to be listed on your transcript, be familiar with that. Know that we're going to take that into account to some extent. It's going to vary school by school and how they take that into account. And often it's not that one thing that makes the decision. All right. So don't stress over that one mark that might not be your best mark.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question here. Does it help to apply early, either ED, early decision, or EA, to a school that is a top choice?
I can go ahead and start. We do have both ED and EA and regular decision. For ED, yeah, it can help a lot. For Miami specifically, it's a higher acceptance rate. If it's your number one, I'd encourage you to do that. However, it is a binding contract. You sign it, your guardian signs it, we have your high school counselor sign it. It does say, if I'm admitted, I'm coming. And that's regardless if you get scholarship or not. So please, I know we mentioned earlier, have those tough conversations about finance and what you can afford. If you are looking at your dream school, your top choice, and you'll do anything and can afford or loans or whatever that may be, think about it. If it's something that's going to be a question, don't do it. Don't lock yourself into that contract. And maybe that's a Miami perception. Early action is a great way to go. And this, again, varies school by school. For us, it's non-binding, but it's an earlier notification from us. There's interest there that you're doing this early, you're getting it done. So for Miami, EA's approach, yes, it's great. ED is great. However, you need to really have a conversation with your family in terms of the financial piece when thinking about ED.
And I'll just put in a quick plug for a school that has early decision and regular decision, but not early action, that even though we don't have early action, if you're not applying through the binding process, you can still apply early. And in fact, many schools might even have a earlier priority merit scholarship deadline or some other incentive to try to encourage students who are applying regulars to still apply early. And obviously, we might even read your application earlier, because we're not going to wait till the day after the deadline to start reading. So it could be to your benefit in many ways, and also just to give yourself a little bit of extra time if there's that one letter of recommendation or that one other required piece of the greater application that is missing. You're giving yourself some more time to make sure everything gets in well ahead of the deadline.
Thank you. So we have about wonderful questions that were given to us by students, and there are quite a few left. So I'm going to call this a lightning round. And we're going to go through some of those questions just to give everyone a taste of your impressions. How do you work with students with disabilities? Should students reveal a disability? And what services do you have on your campuses? Now that may be a little bit of a long answer for their lightning round, but should students discuss disabilities with you?
I will say only if they feel like they really want us to understand the context there. It's not something by any means you need to disclose, and something that you should feel comfortable disclosing. But most importantly, it's something you should talk about with the college if you got accepted, to make sure we have the resources to meet your needs. So that's a little later in the process. But from the admissions standpoint, it's not something we need to know unless you think it's helpful for us understanding your situation.
Okay. How important are athletics and extracurricular activities?
So at CUNY, it's not going to influence our decision really one way or the other, but I think it's just a wonderful thing to think about as a way to become much more involved once you're on a campus, to pursue different activities, and certainly just to show that you are engaged in other things, that you have leadership skills. Those are all wonderful things that grow out of being part of a team or volunteer work. So in that capacity, yes, it's a definite plus.
Thank you. Anybody else, just real quick?
I can do real quick. I would just add too, I think it goes back to our comment about wanting to have very well-rounded campuses. And so I always answer that question by saying it's not specific activities we're looking for. We're really looking for how you spend your week. I use the orchestra analogy. We don't want to just admit violinists, because then there's no horns or there's no percussion. And so we just want to see how you spend your week, and when you are interested in something, how are you engaged with it? That's more important to us than the specific activities or the specific sports or the specific clubs.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Is it a big deal if a student has one poor academic year, say in 9th or 10th grade, but has a strong 11th and 12th grade year?
I can start. I'm not going to say it's not a big deal. We will take notice, but something to keep in mind is many schools look for something that we call an upward trend. That's an upward trend in your academics, the rigor of your coursework. Sometimes the transition to high school is hard. You're just human. Sometimes a pandemic happens in the middle of your sophomore or junior year. It happens. So we understand that we are human too. We don't expect perfection, but progress. So if you do have maybe a challenging semester or year for whatever reason, as long as you're, working your way up and bouncing back, I think that's more important to focus on.
Seeing a lot of agreement here. Do you use a wait list, and how often do you go to it?
Yes. Wait lists are commonly used in admissions. It's going to, again, vary school by school. Over the years, it's becoming a little bit more common. Obviously, students are applying to more and more schools, so you can only pick one of them, and we're kind of hoping to figure that part out. But usually when we're using the wait list, those are fun opportunities and really helpful opportunities for us to try to get that student that we know is qualified, but we just didn't have the space for. But it varies year to year and how often and how deep it or how far down a wait list. And it's not often a list as you may think. It could be a variety of different factors we're looking for way late in the year. So don't get too hung up on that, but it could happen.
And I'll just add that if you do get that waitlist letter, and it's obviously not the decision that you're hoping for, and you're not feeling great, if you're still interested in that institution, respond to it right away. We certainly saw that this year, that when we would make the decision to go to the waitlist was a lot different this year, and could potentially be even different in the next year than in prior years, just because of a lot of the uncertainty out there. And so the way you put yourself in the best position is, as soon as you get that, send in the response form. So at whatever point that college admissions office decides to go to the wait list, you're already on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And we have one final question. Does it matter what you do in the summer? Does it make a difference in the admissions process?
It doesn't. Well, I mean, it does. You have to enjoy your summer and do something that is going to keep you energized for particularly the next academic cycle. If that's college, then yes, college. But we're not trying to see you do something extraordinary for the sake of auditioning for admissions. That's not what the summer is about. Do something you're interested in. Do volunteer work if you want to volunteer. Go play a sport if you like playing sports. Read 10 books if you like to read. Intern work, do things that you need to do and like to do.
Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of our questions. We're going to be
actually, Dr. Fight, we've had a couple of questions.
We do
emailed.
have a few questions. Okay, great.
So here's one. Being from a foreign country and just coming into the States, I only have 11th and 12th grade history. Is that a weakness for the application? And how can this be balanced with other material to have the same opportunities on the applications, besides good grades, of course?
I'll say just quickly on a transcript review, we're often not looking for reasons to say no. So that would be a scenario where you're already looking at it as a college not going to like this. It's probably not something that we're going to hone in on and say this is not an adequate application file. We're going to look to see that you satisfy your high school requirements, as that's important to us. But every student has a different context to their academic storyline, and that's what we're looking at. So just keep plugging along on the work you got.
And another question that was emailed in is, how are you considering student performance in 2020, especially during the spring when schools were just figuring out remote schooling? Some schools had pass fails, some schools had no grades, others had letter grades, etc.
Well, I know we're being as understanding as we possibly can. I mean, we all know that this has been a really difficult time for students, for families. People have gone through a lot. So, you know, we're not certainly holding anything against a student. You know, we know that this has been a challenging time.
And that's all the email questions we had.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Right now, what we're going to do is just let our students who are watching know that you've gotten a lot of information that you wanted, and I hope this has really humanized the admissions process. You see that there are wonderful people on the other side who are going to be ready to embrace you when you're ready to go. So I want to just thank our panel. That was just wonderful. And we're going to turn this over to our counselors for a few minutes so that you can, take a look at what next steps you need to do to get started on the process. So let's have our counselors join us. I think I hear Miss Hannon. She's coming. All right. Okay, it's all yours.
All right, so next up, I hope, first of all, thank you to the panelists. This was very informative for us counselors as well to help us help counsel our students. So thank you. And so moving forward, course selection. Yes, we're only halfway through this year, but we are getting ready to prepare for next year. So students should start thinking about what courses they'll be taking, talking to their teachers about what may be appropriate, and will be going into or virtually or whatever for wherever your students are, and going to do the actual course selection with them during that first week of February. So they want to have their choices ready to go that week. And once that's done, we're going to invite you parents and the students to a individual junior meeting that will be done virtually, whether we have the student here with us, if it's their cohort day, or they're home with you, or you're at the office and they're at home and you're at the, I don't know. But anyway, we will have you ready to go for a junior meeting so we can talk about you specifically. Tonight, we heard a lot about what you can do, but each of you will have your own path to college, and we want to discuss that with you. How that's going to work is you're going to, starting next week, we're going to have you start to call Mrs. Williams, and she's at 777-4872. Maybe someone could throw that in the chat for me. So if we have that number, that's who you call. She'll look at your student schedule and our schedules, and then we'll schedule that meeting, one that we really look forward to having every year. It gets a very personal touch, and we look forward to seeing you there. Then there's also the preparing and register for the SAT and ACT. So that's coming up as well. Those dates are on both of the websites. We also covered it in college and career prep. If you're not sure what that is, parents, have a conversation with your students. They know what that is. So you can look at those schedules on our classroom, and you want to start registering for those. The registrations are about a month prior to the actual test. Again, it's a pandemic. Some seniors never tested and wanted to, so we don't even know if students will be able to test. The next date is February, which I believe the date has passed already. Actually, it's tomorrow. If you want to take the ACT in February, the deadline is tomorrow to register for that. So I'm not sure if that will work out because we are in the middle of a pandemic. They may move you, but we do suggest you do test to be ready in case you do need to send one. And if it's an optional school, then you don't need to send it, but it's always good to be prepared with that. Anybody else want to talk?
Yeah, I think just, we're finishing up the college and career prep course. So, juniors, you've been working really hard all second quarter. So know you have a good, solid foundation that you're working from. And I think once we have the individual meetings, those pieces will come together even more. So this is, I think, an exciting time, a great time in your lives thinking about next steps and planning, what the best, road for you is. And I want to echo, Emily's sentiments from earlier. It's really about you. This is your process, individual to you. I know, from doing this for many years here, the college process creates a lot of buzz, but just come back to you and what makes sense and what is the right fits and the right path for you. So that's my advice moving forward. And the most important piece that I want you to focus on and keep with you in these coming months. But hopefully you can do some virtual visits. You can get on campus, soon, so you can actually see and visit and get a good sense of things. But I think from what I heard tonight, you absolutely have the ability to connect with the admissions people virtually as well via email, and that's really unique and somewhat new, being that that's the only form we can. So you've got this, have fun with it. And we're here for you every step of the way.
Thank you so much. Just to say once again, how much we appreciate our panelists, Emma Fortunato from Dominican College, Lori Austin from Lehman College, Craig Broccoli from Binghamton University, Emily Morris from Miami University in Ohio, and Kevin McKenna from our neighborhood, Sarah Lawrence College, and finally Patrick O'Neill from the University of Rochester. And thank you all so much, and thanks to our families. And don't be strangers. We look forward to working with you. Okay, everyone. Good night.
Thanks so much, everyone. Stay well.
Thank you. Thank you.